I should have known the moment I walked into that conference room that I was not fit to face anyone, let alone an entire team waiting for direction. The air felt too thin, the overhead lights too bright, and every small sound scraped against the inside of my skull. It was the final week before Christmas, and exhaustion had been sitting on my shoulders for months, heavier than any quarterly report or investor call. When Claire, my youngest analyst, approached me with a small red box in both hands, her voice soft and hopeful as she said, "Merry Christmas, Mr. Hale," something inside me snapped with a violence that shocked even me. I saw the gift only for a second before my hand swiped it off the table, sending it crashing to the floor. The entire room stiffened. Claire's smile evaporated. Her hands trembled as if she were trying to figure out whether she had just been foolish or offensive, or both. My voice rose without my permission, sharp and cold. "I do not need this right now, Claire. I do not need anyone's sympathy." The silence that followed was the kind that freezes a person from the inside. Eyes dropped toward the table. A few people flinched, and then Claire stepped back, her face drained of color. In that moment, I saw the fear I once knew too well. I saw myself at 9 years old, shrinking into corners to avoid the anger of adults who never learned how to hold their own tempers. My chest tightened as if a hand had wrapped around my lungs. Without saying another word, I walked out of the room, past the glass doors, past the lobby, past the receptionist who called after me. I did not grab my coat or my gloves. I only knew I could not stay. Cold wind slapped against my face as I stepped outside, the kind of cold that reminded a man he was still alive even when he wished he were not. Snow drifted down in slow spirals while I walked with no direction except away. I did not know how far I had gone until the familiar outline of Maplewood Park appeared through the falling white. I found a bench near the frozen pond, its iron slats dusted with snow. I sat down and let the cold bite through my suit pants, welcoming the sting like penance. My breaths came out harsh, sharp clouds in the dim winter air. A thought repeated in my head, steady and merciless. "You have become the very thing you hated." My eyes burned, and I pressed my palms against them. I had not cried in decades, not since the night I realized no one was coming back for me. But the pressure welled behind my eyes, painful and heavy. I tried to swallow it down. I failed. And then I heard it. A small voice, clear and sincere in the snowy stillness. "Don't cry, mister. You can borrow my mom." The world around me paused. I lifted my head. A little boy stood a few feet away, bundled in a navy jacket with a bear-shaped knit hat. His cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, his breath forming soft puffs. But his eyes, wide and bright, looked at me with something I had not seen in years. Concern, real concern, not obligation, not politeness. Just simple, unfiltered empathy. Behind him hurried a woman with warm brown hair tucked into a gray scarf. She placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "Milo, sweetheart, give the man some space," she said gently before turning to me with an apologetic expression. "I am so sorry. He is very friendly." I opened my mouth to respond, but my voice snagged on the rawness in my throat. Milo studied me with the seriousness only children possess. "You looked sad," he said. "Mom makes people feel better. You can borrow her if you want." His mother looked mortified, but something in her eyes softened when she saw my face. Maybe she recognized the exhaustion there. Maybe she saw the remnants of a man trying not to fall apart. She hesitated for only a second before reaching into the small paper bag Milo carried. She pulled out a warm pastry wrapped neatly in parchment and held it toward me. "He wanted you to have this," she said. "Says it helps on bad days." My hands shook as I took it from her. The warmth seeped into my palms, unfamiliar yet deeply welcome. "Thank you," I managed. The woman nodded and began to guide Milo away. But Milo, stubborn and earnest, gave me one last smile over his shoulder, a smile that felt like sunlight in winter. That single gesture offered so freely cracked something open inside me, something I did not realize had been frozen for years. Milo walked a few steps ahead of his mother, kicking at the snow with small boots that squeaked with every step, and somehow he kept glancing back at me as if he were responsible for my emotional state. It was absurd, really, that a child could see through me more clearly than the people who had worked beside me for years. I had spent most of my adult life perfecting the art of being unreadable. But Milo regarded me with the kind of curiosity that made it impossible to hide. He slowed down until he was walking beside me, his head tilted slightly upward. "Do you always sit alone on benches?" he asked. Lucia let out a quiet sigh. "Milo, please." "It's okay," I said. My voice sounded different, gentler, as if I were afraid to startle the moment. Milo waited for my answer, eyes round with expectation. "I was just taking a break," I said. From what I considered lying, but his face made it difficult. "From people," I said. "Oh," he replied, thinking deeply. "Because they make you sad." That question hit harder than it should have. I did not answer right away, which apparently was enough for Milo to reach his own conclusion. "Mom says grown-ups get tired in their hearts," he said, "not just their legs." Lucia nearly tripped over her own feet. "Milo Carter," she muttered, her cheeks reddening. "You cannot say everything that comes into your head." She turned to me with a shy, flustered smile. "I promise he is usually less observant." "I do not mind," I said, though my throat felt tight. "He is not wrong." The admission surprised even me. We reached the edge of Maplewood's small downtown, and warm light spilled from the windows of a cocoa shop tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Milo pointed eagerly. "We come here after school sometimes. Their marshmallows are huge." Lucia hesitated before pushing open the door. "If you want to warm up before heading home," she said to me, her voice careful, "you are welcome to join us. It is crowded at this hour, so it is safe." A subtle reassurance for herself, and also for me. She did not know me, and she was a mother. Her caution made sense. Her decision to include me despite it made even more. Inside, the shop smelled like cinnamon and melting chocolate. The heater hummed, warming the air in a way that made my fingers sting as the feeling returned to them. Lucia guided Milo to a small table near the window. She ordered a cocoa for him and a tea for herself. She looked at me when the barista turned her way, silently offering to include me. "Just hot water," I said. "Please." "Hot water." Milo wrinkled his nose. "That's not cozy at all." Lucia shot him a look. "Milo." "What?" He whispered loudly. "Even sad people deserve cocoa." I almost laughed. It felt foreign in my chest, but real. "I will be fine," I said. "I am not much for sweets. You do not have to be." Milo replied, "You just have to not be alone." The simplicity of that statement sat heavily on my chest. I took the seat across from him. Lucia quietly slipped off her gloves, setting them neatly beside her. Her movements were efficient but gentle, the kind of gentleness learned from years of holding things that could break. Her eyes flicked toward me, curious but not invasive. "Long day?" she asked. "Long month," I corrected. Her smile was empathetic but cautious, as if she knew not to press further. Milo, of course, had no such hesitation. "Why were you sat on the bench?" Milo, Lucia murmured. "You do not have to answer that," she told me. I looked down at my hands, still slightly shaking. "I was not a very good person today," I said. Milo blinked, processing. "Did you hit someone?" "No," I said quickly. "Nothing like that." "Did you yell?" My silence answered for me. "Mom says yelling is for people who do not know how to use their soft voice." Lucia covered her face with her hand. "I swear he is not always like this." "He is fine," I said. And he might be right again. The cocoa arrived steam, curling around the giant marshmallow on top. Milo stirred his with a wooden stick until the marshmallow melted into a frothy swirl. Lucia took a slow sip of her tea, watching Milo, then watching me. Not in judgment, in observation. She seemed like someone who spent her life paying attention to small things because small things mattered. "Did something bad happen?" she asked softly. The question was simple, but the weight of it pressed against an old bruise inside me. I wanted to say no to protect myself from the vulnerability that came with honesty. But today had already stripped me of too many defenses. "I hurt someone who did not deserve it," I said, "and I hate that I did." Lucia's expression softened. "It happens," she said. "Not the hurting, the regret." "Do you ever get tired of trying to be good?" I asked. She laughed quietly, sadly. "Every day, but I do not know how to be anything else." Milo leaned forward, resting his chin on the table. "Mom says people get mean when they forget they are human." Lucia sighed, gentle thoughts inside voice, please. I stared at the child, wondering how someone so small could say things that struck with such accuracy. Maybe children see the world before they learn how to blur it. Maybe that clarity is something we unlearn. The warmth from the room seeped slowly into my bones, loosening the tightness that had held me since the moment I shouted at Claire. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like I was running from something. I felt like I was resting. Milo finished his cocoa and wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve. Then he looked at me again and asked the question that nearly emptied the air from my lungs. "Who do you spend Christmas with, Mr. Milo?" "No," Lucia said immediately, but he waited. Quiet, innocent, unaware of the territory he had wandered into. "No one," I said finally. "I spend it with no one." His brows pulled together in confusion, the kind of confusion born from the belief that no one should be alone during the holidays. Then he said in a whisper that felt too sincere for how small his voice was, "That sounds like the saddest thing in the world." And for a moment, I believed he was right. The cocoa shop buzzed with soft laughter and murmured conversations, the kind of low hum that usually tightened my nerves, but tonight felt strangely comforting. The golden light hanging from the ceiling lamps cast a gentle glow across the wooden tables, making the space feel older than it was lived in, almost like the kind of place people returned to year after year because it held their memories better than they could. Milo swung his legs back and forth beneath the table, his boots knocking softly against the chair legs in an absent rhythm. Lucia wrapped her hands around her cup of tea palms, hovering near the steam, as if she were absorbing warmth through her skin. I realized I was doing the same thing, though, with a plain mug of hot water instead of anything sweet or soothing. I kept my gaze fixed on the rising steam, unsure how to fit myself into the small circle of warmth these two carried so easily. We sat in silence for a while, the comfortable kind that does not demand explanation. Milo broke it first, of course. "If you spend Christmas alone, what do you do all day?" His mother inhaled sharply. "Milo." "What?" He whispered, though far too loudly to count as whispering. "I just want to know." I looked at him, then at Lucia. She seemed torn between apologizing again and letting me answer for myself. "So I did. Mostly work," I said. "Or read. Sometimes I watch old movies, but not with anyone." "No." Milo frowned as if this violated some kind of natural law. "Even Mommy watches Christmas movies with me, and she doesn't even like the ones with singing." Lucia's mouth twitched. "Some singing is fine. The constant singing is not fine." Milo nodded as though this were a long-standing argument he had been winning for years. I found myself smiling. The expression felt rusty, like something I had not used in a long time. Lucia noticed and her eyes softened, though she said nothing. She took another sip of tea, then leaned back slightly. "What about you?" she asked. "Did you celebrate Christmas growing up?" The question pressed on an old bruise that had never fully healed. I swallowed before answering. "Not really." "No tree?" "No." "No gifts?" "Not the kind you wrap." "No family." That word hung in the air like a fragile ornament. I did not pick it up. Instead, I let the silence answer. Lucia nodded as if she understood more in that silence than she would have from a long explanation. She did not pity me, and that was perhaps the greatest kindness she could offer. She simply let the truth be what it was. Milo, however, did not let silence stand for anything. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper covered in bright scribbles. "I made this at school today," he said proudly. "It's my Christmas family." He unfolded it carefully and held it up. It was a crayon drawing of a small apartment with a crooked Christmas tree in the corner. At the center were two stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. Both were smiling huge, lopsided smiles. "That's me and Mommy," he said, pointing. "We don't have a big family, but that's okay because we're enough." Something lodged in my throat, something that felt dangerously close to breaking loose. "It's a good drawing," I said quietly. "You think so? I do." Milo grinned with pride. "Next week we get to make our Christmas wish cards. I already know what mine is." Lucia raised an eyebrow. "You do?" "Yep," he said. "I'm gonna wish for something you can't buy." She groaned. "Please do not be a pet." "It's not a pet." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "It's a surprise." Lucia gave him a suspicious look, but let it go, shaking her head affectionately. She turned back to me. "I hope you do not mind all his questions. He is usually better filtered around strangers." "I do not mind," I said. "It has been a long time since anyone asked me anything personal. Maybe people do not know how," she suggested gently. "Or maybe you seem like someone who does not want to be known." Her words struck a truth I was not ready for. I looked down at my hands, still slightly trembling from earlier. For so long, I had built walls without even realizing it, protecting myself from the vulnerability of connection, of being seen. But tonight, I was sitting with two people who looked at me without judgment, who made space for me without asking for anything in return. Lucia checked the time on her phone. "We should probably get home soon," she said. "It gets icy on the sidewalks after 8. Milo bounced in his seat. "Can we get marshmallows to go?" "No marshmallows to go. They melt instantly. Not if you eat them fast." "No." He sighed dramatically and slid off his chair. Lucia reached for her purse, pulling out her gloves and scarf. She bundled herself carefully before helping Milo zip his jacket to the top. Then she looked at me with a softness I struggled to hold. "Thank you for sitting with us," she said. "It was nice to meet you." The word nice felt too small for what this hour had been. It had been warm, grounding, strangely healing. But I could not articulate that, so I simply nodded. "Thank you for the company," I said. "And the pastry." Milo tugged at my sleeve before heading toward the door. "If you ever need someone to talk to," he said, "I'm really good at listening. Mom says it's my superpower." I met his earnest eyes, and something inside me shifted, subtle but undeniable. I believe that I said, and I did. As they stepped outside into the snowy street, I watched their figures disappear into the warm glow of the street lamps. I felt the warmth of the cocoa shop linger on my skin, even as the cold air rushed in through the door behind them. A room like this, a moment like this, a child like Milo, a woman like Lucia. I had not thought I deserved any of it. Maybe I still did not. But for a brief, fleeting hour, I had been allowed to feel like I did. The night after I left the cocoa shop, sleep would not come. I lay in my apartment surrounded by glass chrome and silence, the kind of silence that swallows a man whole. I stared at the ceiling far longer than I should have, replaying every moment with Lucia and Milo. Their voices stayed with me long after they walked away, echoing through my empty living room, like the faint residue of warmth clinging to a place that had never held it before. I tried to push the feeling aside, but it followed me the next day and the day after that. I kept seeing Lucia's soft smile as she handed me that pastry. I kept hearing Milo's voice saying that being alone on Christmas was the saddest thing in the world. Those things seeped under my skin in a way I did not understand. 3 days passed before I saw them again. I had returned to the park without fully admitting to myself that I hoped they might be there. The snow had deepened, dusting every bench tree branch and lamppost with a soft white layer. I sat on the same cold iron bench, gripping a cup of tea I had bought from a vendor purely to keep my hands warm. I did not drink it. I rarely drank the things I bought. I suppose it was another habit from childhood: hold what gives you warmth even if you cannot use it. I was staring at the frozen pond when I heard familiar laughter drifting through the air. Light, bright, unmistakable. I turned and saw Milo running toward the pond, his arms flapping like wings, his boots slipping on the icy patches. Lucia followed at a slower pace, holding a paper bag close to her chest to keep its contents warm. Her scarf fluttered behind her. She saw me before Milo did. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly softening into something more like recognition. I stood unsure whether I should approach or pretend I had no expectation of seeing them. Milo removed the choice altogether. He spotted me and sprinted in my direction, waving both arms. "Mr. Evan," he shouted, "you came back. I told Mom you would." Lucia hurried after him, breathless. "Milo, slow down. The ground is icy." But Milo ignored her, stopping right in front of me, beaming the way children beam when the world still makes sense to them. "Did you bring mittens this time?" he asked. "Your hands were freezing last time." I almost smiled. "I forgot," I admitted. "Good thing we brought extras," Lucia said, pulling a knitted pair from the bag. She hesitated before offering them as if worried I might refuse. "They are new." Milo picked them out at the market. They were navy blue with little white patterns stitched across the wrists. I hesitated, but not because I did not want them. I hesitated because I did. "Thank you," I said, taking them carefully. Milo puffed out his chest. "I told Mom you needed warm hands. Cold hands make sad hearts worse." Lucia groaned softly. "Milo, what?" "It's true." His blunt sincerity made something tighten in my chest again. We walked together along the snowy path, Milo bounding ahead, leaving small footprints in uneven patterns. Lucia's steps were slower measured. She fell into rhythm beside me. For a moment, it felt almost natural, almost familiar. She glanced at me, her breath visible in clouds. "How have you been?" she asked. "Better," I said. "Because of the other night." Her eyes softened. "I'm glad." We reached a bench overlooking the pond. Lucia brushed the snow off and sat down, pulling Milo close to zip his jacket higher. He squirmed but tolerated it. "Mom," he said, "tell the story about the kids you used to help." "Not today," she murmured. "It is cold, but Mr. Evan might like it." She looked at me hesitant. I nodded. "I would," I said. Something in her face eased. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and stared out over the frozen water. "My mom was a foster care volunteer," she began. "She took in kids who needed a place for a few days or weeks. I grew up around children who came and went. Some were talkative, some were angry. Some were so quiet you forgot they were there unless you looked closely." A shadow of a memory slid across her expression. "One winter," she continued, "there was a boy about 8 or 9. He had dark hair, quiet eyes, and he always held a drawing of a reindeer. He never went anywhere without it." The breath froze inside me. She kept speaking, unaware of the tremor running through my hands. "He barely spoke," she said, "but I remember sneaking a piece of candy into his bag because he looked sad all the time. I was young, so I thought candy could fix anything." Milo rested his chin on her arm. "Did it help?" Lucia smiled faintly. "I do not know. He left one morning without saying goodbye. I remember looking out the window and watching the social worker walk him to the car. He held that drawing so tight it was wrinkled." She exhaled her breath, forming a thin cloud. "I have wondered about him sometimes. I hope he found a good life." I stared at the snowflakes settling on my shoes. My heart thudded painfully, each beat a reminder of a past I had spent decades trying to bury. The reindeer drawing, the foster home, the girl who slipped a piece of candy into my bag. I had not thought of those things in years, but hearing them from her lips, shaped by her memory, brought it all back. I swallowed hard, my throat thick. "What was his name?" I asked, though I already knew. Lucia shook her head. "I do not remember. It was a long time ago." I nodded slowly because there was nothing else to do. I could not tell her, not yet. The truth sat heavy on my tongue, too heavy to speak. She had known me long before she ever knew she knew me, and I was not ready for what it would mean if she realized it. Milo tugged at my sleeve, breaking the moment. "Mr. Evan," he said, "are you sad again?" I blinked, pulled back into the present. "No," I said softly. "Just remembering." "Remembering hurts sometimes," he said. I looked at him, startled by how true that felt. "Yes," I said. "It does." The winter memory I had buried long ago was back now, alive and pulsing, and for the first time I was not sure whether to run from it or hold on. The following week, Lucia invited me to Milo's winter showcase at the elementary school. She extended the invitation casually, almost as if she expected me to decline, but I surprised both of us when I said yes without hesitation. I told myself it was because the school was close to my office, or because I needed a break from work, or because I had been meaning to apologize to Claire again. But the truth was simpler and far more unsettling. I wanted to see them. The school gym buzzed with the sounds of children rehearsing lines, parents chatting, and the occasional squeal that only a room full of excited kids can produce. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling, and a row of folding chairs faced a makeshift stage decorated with cardboard trees. The whole place smelled like glue sticks and hot chocolate. Lucia stood near the stage helping organize props while Milo practiced his lines with a few classmates. When he spotted me through the crowd, his face lit up in a way that made something warm curl in my chest. He ran toward me and grabbed my sleeve. "You came," he said, bouncing on his toes. "I told Mom you would, but she didn't believe me." Lucia shook her head as she approached. "I believed you," she said to him. Then she looked at me. "Thank you for coming." Before I could respond, a sharp, angry voice cut through the noise of the gym. "Which one of these kids stole my son's toy?" A man in an expensive winter coat stormed across the room, dragging a smaller boy behind him. Parents turned. Teachers stiffened. The man shoved a bright red toy car into the air like evidence in a trial. "This was in the hallway outside the classroom," he snapped. "And Leo says someone took it from his backpack." He scanned the children like a hawk searching for prey. His gaze landed on Milo, who was standing closest. "You?" the man said, pointing. "You were near the cubbies earlier." "Did you take it?" Milo froze. "No," he whispered. The father stepped closer. "Speak up." Lucia immediately stepped between them. "Sir, please lower your voice." He said he did not. "Kids lie to avoid getting in trouble," the man said. "Especially kids who do not have fathers around to teach them respect." Lucia inhaled sharply as if the words had struck her physically. Milo's eyes filled with tears. Something inside me snapped. I stepped forward. "That is enough." The father turned, clearly preparing to dismiss me until he saw my expression. Something in it made him pause. "Do you know this child?" he asked. "I do," I said. "And unless you have actual proof he took that toy, you have no right to accuse him," he scoffed. "Proof? How about the fact that the toy was outside the room he walked through?" "So were 20 other children," I said, "including your own." Gasps rippled nearby. A teacher hurried over. "Everything all right here?" the father demanded. "This boy stole my son's toy. I want him disciplined." The teacher frowned. "We do not discipline anyone without evidence." "Check the hallway cameras," I said. "Every school has them. It will take 15 minutes to pull the footage." The teacher nodded. "That is true. We can review it." The man hesitated. His confidence flickered. "Fine," he muttered. "Check it. I know what my son said." Lucia crouched beside Milo, brushing hair from his forehead. "It's okay," she whispered. "We know the truth." Milo sniffed. "I didn't touch it, Mom. I saw it on the floor, but I didn't pick it up." "I know," she said softly. "I know." 15 tense minutes passed. The teacher returned with another staff member and a tablet. "We reviewed the footage from the hallway," she said loudly enough for the crowd that had gathered. "The toy fell out of Leo's backpack when he ran to meet his friend." Milo approached it, but he did not touch it. Instead, he stepped around it and kept walking. The father shifted uncomfortably. The teacher continued. Another student picked up the toy, realized it was not his, and placed it on a bench. A custodian later moved it to the lost and found table. So there was no theft. Murmurs spread through the gym. The father's face reddened. "You should apologize," I said quietly. Something in my tone left no room for debate. The man looked at Milo, then at Lucia, then back at his son. He exhaled sharply. "Fine," he muttered. "I'm sorry." It was stiff and insincere, but it was public, and Milo needed to hear it. Lucia looked at me with something like gratitude mixed with relief. Milo simply wiped his cheeks and stepped closer to me as if he felt safer in my shadow. "I told the truth," he said softly. I crouched down so we were eye level. "I know you did. And I believed you." His lower lip trembled. "You did?" "Yes," I said. "Always." His arms went around my neck before I even registered the movement. He hugged me fiercely the way children do when they desperately need someone to hold on to. I froze for half a second, overwhelmed by the trust in that small embrace. Then slowly, carefully, I wrapped my arms around him. Lucia watched us, her eyes shining with a mix of emotion I could not name. When Milo finally pulled back, he smiled lighter than before, as if a weight had been lifted off him. For the rest of the showcase, he stayed close to me occasionally, reaching for my hand or tugging on my sleeve just to make sure I was still there. And the truth was, I was not going anywhere. Not that night. Not for a long time after. Something had shifted between us. Something quiet but undeniable. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had become the kind of man a child could run to instead of away from. In the days after the incident at the school, something began to shift inside me, something I had not anticipated and was entirely unprepared for. Milo called me his friend. Lucia thanked me more than once for being there for him, and I felt myself slipping into a place I had never allowed myself to occupy before, a place dangerously close to belonging. That was the problem. Belonging had never ended well for me. Every version of it I had ever known had been temporary, conditional, or ripped away just when I started to trust it. I told myself I was being rational when I began to pull back. I told myself I was protecting them and protecting myself. But the truth was far less noble. I was scared, terrified in a way that made no sense for a man who had spoken on stages, negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, and maintained control through storms most people never saw coming. Yet the idea of becoming important to a child, to a mother who had already carried enough weight in her life, filled me with a fear I could not articulate. So I stayed away. I ignored the impulse to walk past the park. I did not respond to Lucia's text asking if I wanted to join them for cocoa again. It was short, polite, warm in the gentle way that was so distinctly her. Hopeful, even. I typed a reply twice, erased it twice, and eventually set the phone aside until the notification faded into the background, like all the other things in my life I pretended not to feel. Silence is a strange thing. It can protect or destroy, heal or wound, depending entirely on the heart that receives it. For me, silence was familiar. For Lucia, it was disappointment. For Milo, it was confusion. 3 days after I withdrew, I saw them at the market completely by accident. I had gone to buy groceries for the first time in months, a half-hearted attempt to prove to myself that I was still a functional adult. I turned into the bread aisle and froze when I saw them. Milo was examining a display of gingerbread cookies, lifting each bag as if trying to determine which one had the best magical potential. Lucia was comparing prices on the shelf, her brow furrowed in concentration. They looked like a picture from a life I had never lived but always noticed in passing windows. For a moment, I considered turning around before they noticed me. But Milo spotted me first. His face lit up exactly the way it had at the school. Then as quickly as the light appeared, it dimmed. He paused. He looked at his mother for reassurance, then back at me, uncertainty clouding the bright ease he had always shown. "Hi," he said quietly, almost cautiously. "Hi, Milo," I replied. Lucia straightened and turned. Her expression was polite but softer than I deserved. "Evan," she said, "it's good to see you." Her tone was warm enough to be kind, distant enough to hide whatever she had been feeling about my silence. "I've been meaning to thank you again," she continued, "for what you did at the school." I nodded. "It was nothing." It wasn't nothing, she said, at least not to us. Silence stretched between us again, this time far heavier than before. Milo tugged on Lucia's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, but I heard it anyway. Did I do something wrong? The breath caught painfully in my chest. Lucia crouched down to face him. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "You didn't do anything wrong at all." He looked at me, then eyes searching for an explanation I could not give him. "You didn't come back to the park," he said. "I had no defense for that." His voice wavered. "Did I make you upset?" "No," I said quickly, too quickly. "You didn't." "Then why didn't you come?" I swallowed hard. There are many answers a grown man might give, none of which would make sense to a child. I chose the truth, or as much of it as I could manage. "Sometimes adults get scared," I said. "They don't always know how to say it." Milo blinked, trying to understand, but the sting of my absence lingered in his eyes. Lucia straightened slowly, brushing her hands on her coat. "You don't owe us explanations," she said quietly. "And you don't owe us your time." Her voice held no accusation, but the gentleness in it made the words sink deeper. "You've been kind to us, and we're grateful for that. But we don't expect anything more." She was letting me off the hook. That was the worst part. She was giving me the out I had been reaching for, even though a part of me recoiled at the freedom. Freedom meant distance. Distance meant safety. But it also meant loneliness, and I knew that loneliness too well to pretend I wanted it. I should have spoken then. I should have apologized. Instead, I did nothing. My silence became the answer I never meant to give. Lucia gave me a small, polite smile, the kind people offer when they are protecting themselves from disappointment. "We should finish our shopping," she said. "Take care, Evan." They walked away, Milo glancing back twice, each look carving a deeper line into the guilt tightening my chest. I watched them disappear behind the shelves, swallowed by the crowd, and felt something inside me sink the quiet collapse of a connection I had been too afraid to hold. For the rest of the evening, their absence followed me like a shadow. The silence I had chosen now felt like a wound rather than a shield, and for the first time in many years, I realized I had hurt someone without meaning to, not because of anger, but because of fear. The silence I thought would protect them had only created distance neither of them deserved, and even before I understood it fully, I sensed that this distance would not stay dormant for long. It was only a matter of time before life cracked open again and forced me to confront the very thing I tried so hard to avoid. A week passed before I understood the consequences of my silence, and when they finally reached me, it was not through Lucia or Milo, but through a headline someone forwarded to my phone early on a Thursday morning. I was sitting in my office staring at a spreadsheet without absorbing a single number when the notification appeared. "Community volunteer accused of stealing children's program idea." Below it, a blurry photo of Lucia taken without her knowledge, her expression mid-sentence, as if she were trying to explain something that no one wanted to hear. At first, I thought it had to be a misunderstanding. Then I opened the article. It was a blog post, the kind of venomous, polished accusation crafted by someone who knew exactly how to sound credible without offering a shred of truth. It claimed Lucia had copied the framework for her children's interactive theater project from an older, obscure program created 3 years earlier. It used side-by-side screenshots taken out of context. It accused her of using sympathy to gather donations under false pretenses. It implied she leveraged her status as a single mother to avoid scrutiny. By the end of the article, my jaw was clenched so tightly I tasted copper. I reached for my phone. I did not know what I meant to say, or whether she would even want to hear from me after the way I had withdrawn. But instinct pushed me to dial her number anyway. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Her voice, soft and steady, filled my ear. "This is Lucia. Please leave a message." I hung up without speaking. I did not trust my voice. Instead, I grabbed my coat and stepped into the cold December air. I did not know exactly where she lived, only the general neighborhood she had mentioned in passing, but I headed there anyway, letting instinct lead my steps. When I passed the elementary school, I saw clusters of parents outside talking in tight circles. Their expressions were pinched, judgmental, curious. Some held programs from the winter showcase. Others scrolled through their phones, presumably reading the same article I had. One whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. I always wondered how she managed those projects. Single moms don't have time to do everything alone. Another added, "If the donor pulls out, the whole thing collapses." Maybe it should. I stopped walking, the anger rising inside me like a slow, steady boil. These were the same parents who had applauded their children on stage, who smiled at Lucia when she fixed costumes and arranged props. Now they turned on her with ease, as if kindness were a luxury they could rescind whenever convenient. I forced myself to keep walking. I found her apartment after nearly an hour of searching. It was a modest building with peeling paint and a crooked railing. Lights glowed behind thin curtains on the second floor. I climbed the steps and knocked. The door opened a crack. Milo peeked out first. His face lit briefly, then dimmed as if he remembered he was not supposed to feel excited about me anymore. "Mom." He called quietly, "It's him." Lucia appeared behind him, her hair pulled into a loose knot, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "Evan," she said, sounding surprised. Or maybe not surprised. Maybe just tired. I stepped inside when she waved me in. The living room was cluttered with papers, cardboard cutouts, paintbrushes, and markers. On the coffee table lay her project binder open to a page filled with handwritten notes, diagrams, and sketches. None of it looked anything like the screenshots in the article. "I take it you saw it," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt to hold steady. "Yes," I said. "Are you okay?" She let out a humorless laugh. "No, not really." She sat on the couch and pressed her palms into her eyes. "The donor froze funding this morning. They said they want a formal review. Parents have been messaging me non-stop asking if the accusations are true. Someone even suggested I resign from the volunteer board until things are sorted out." Milo climbed onto the couch beside her and leaned against her side, looking small and uncertain. "Mom didn't steal anything he said. She never steals. She tells me not to take crayons home from school, even when the teacher says we can." The pain in his voice tightened something in my chest. "I know she didn't," I said. "The article is deliberate. Someone wrote it to hurt you." Lucia shook her head. "I know exactly who wrote it." She reached for a folder on the table, opened it, and revealed a stack of old emails. A former collaborator. Brilliant, creative, but unstable. We worked together briefly last year. When I declined to endorse one of her proposals, she accused me of trying to control the project. We stopped working together after that. She looked up at me. "This is revenge." My hands curled into fists. "You should not face this alone." "I am used to doing things alone," she said. "It is just how life works." "It does not have to be," I said. Her eyes flickered to mine. Quiet. Searching. Unsure whether she could believe me. I took a breath. "Lucia, I can help. I have a legal team that handles defamation cases all the time. They can document your original drafts, timestamps witnesses. They can send a cease and desist letter within 24 hours. She blinked, startled. "I don't know if I can afford lawyers." "You don't need to," I said. "I will cover it." "Evan, I cannot ask you to do that." "You didn't ask," I said gently. "I'm offering." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression softening, breaking, rebuilding, all at once. Then she nodded. "Okay." Milo slid off the couch and climbed into my lap as if the choice were obvious. "Mom helps people all the time," he said. "Now she gets help too." I looked at Lucia. A tear slipped down her cheek, something she probably had not intended me to see. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means." But I did know. I knew exactly what it meant to be alone when the world turned against you, and I knew what it meant when someone chose to stand beside you anyway. 2 days after my legal team issued the cease and desist letter, the online article was taken down, the anonymous author exposed and formally warned, and the donor reinstated full funding for Lucia's program. Everything seemed to steady on the surface, but beneath it all, something remained strained, fragile, as if the emotional ground beneath her feet had not quite settled yet. Lucia thanked me repeatedly, though each time her gratitude felt weighted with something deeper, something unspoken. She was relieved, but exhaustion still clung to her like a shadow. Milo, on the other hand, seemed restored to his usual bright energy, even skipping in circles around the living room when Lucia told him the project was moving forward again. He hugged me twice that day, once around my waist and once around my arm, as if deciding which version felt more official. I left their apartment that evening with a warmth in my chest that lasted through the night and into the next morning. But the following afternoon, everything unraveled. I was in my office reviewing projections for the upcoming quarter when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost silenced it, but something tugged at me, something instinctive and uneasy. When I answered, all I heard was shaky breathing and then a voice I recognized instantly. "Evan, it's Lucia." Her words were tight, strained, struggling for breath. "I can't find Milo." The world seemed to tilt. "What do you mean you can't find him?" "He's not at school," she said. "They called me because he didn't show up to aftercare. They assumed I picked him up early." I didn't. I've checked the playground at the bus stop, the routes he sometimes takes when he's pretending he's exploring. He's not anywhere." Her voice cracked and the sound cut straight through me. "I don't know where he is." My chair scraped across the floor as I stood. "Lucia, listen to me. I'm coming right now." I didn't wait for her to respond. I grabbed my coat, ignored the startled looks from my staff, and rushed out of the building so quickly the cold wind hit my face before the doors had fully closed behind me. On my way to her neighborhood, the worst possibilities clawed at my mind. Accidents, strangers, the bitter, cruel unpredictability of the world. I forced my breathing steady as I drove, repeating to myself that Milo was smart, careful, and kind, that he would not wander into danger intentionally. When I reached Lucia's block, she was standing in the middle of the street, arms wrapped tightly around herself despite the heavy coat. Her hair was messy, her cheeks streaked with tears she had stopped trying to wipe away. She looked up when she heard my car door slam. "Evan," she rushed to me. "I can't find him. I can't. He's just gone." I held her by the shoulders. "Tell me everything, every detail." She tried to speak, but her voice wavered. "Kids at school, they said something cruel to him today, something about not having a father. He didn't tell me exactly what. He just came home looking small. I thought he needed space. I thought he was just upset." She covered her mouth. "I didn't think he would run." A cold certainty slid down my spine. "Lucia," I said quietly, "I think I know where he went." She stared at me, confused hope flickering despite her fear. Where I didn't answer with words, I took her hand and started running. She followed without hesitation. The snow was falling harder than earlier, settling quickly on rooftops, car hoods, and the long sidewalks leading toward Maplewood Park. My lungs burned with each breath, but I didn't slow. When the park finally came into view, it was nearly empty. The swings swayed in the wind. The pond was still. And then, at the far edge, near our bench, I saw a small figure curled into a tight ball. Milo. He was sitting on the cold iron slats, his knees drawn to his chest, his face hidden in his jacket. Snow had gathered in his hair on his shoulders and on the ground around him. He was trembling. My heart clenched. "Milo!" I called, breathless, as I approached. He lifted his head slowly, eyes red and glassy. When he saw me, something like relief flickered across his face, but it was dim quiet, weighed down by the hurt inside him. "I knew you'd come," he whispered, shivering. I knelt in front of him and opened my coat, wrapping it around his small body as I pulled him gently into my arms. He was ice cold. Lucia reached us a moment later. She collapsed to her knees beside us, crying openly as she cupped his cheeks in her hands. "Baby, why would you run away like that? I was terrified." Milo leaned into her touch, but didn't look away from me. His voice trembled. "I wanted to see how it feels, to wait for someone who might not come." Lucia gasped softly. I closed my eyes. The words hit me with a force so strong I felt it in my bones. "Someone said," Milo whispered, "that my dad left because he didn't want me. And I thought maybe you wouldn't come back either." I pulled him closer, my throat tightening painfully. I looked at him, at Lucia, at the snow gathering all around us, and realized this child was repeating a feeling I had once lived through alone. But he wasn't alone now. "Milo." I said, my voice steady despite the ache inside me. "There is nothing you could ever do that would make you less worth coming back for." His eyes filled with tears. "But you didn't come to the park for a long time." "That was my mistake," I said. "A big one. And I'm sorry. I should have been here." Lucia sat beside us on the cold bench, wrapping one arm around Milo and one around me, as if holding the entire moment together. Snow continued to fall in soft spirals. Street lamps glowed dimly through the white haze. And somewhere in the deep quiet of that park, I knew that everything between us had changed. This wasn't just fear or guilt or connection. It was something deeper, something binding, something I never expected to feel again. Milo's shivering had quieted, but his breathing was still unsteady as I held him inside my coat, the cold pressing around us like a second skin. Lucia kept one arm around him, her thumb brushing gentle circles on his shoulder, as if her touch alone could anchor him back to safety. Snow continued to fall in soft sheets, muffling every sound in the park until it felt like we were sitting inside a world made entirely of white silence. Milo leaned his forehead against my chest, his small hands gripping my coat as though he were afraid the wind might pull either of us apart. "I didn't mean to make you and Mom scared," he said in a trembling whisper. I wanted to know." I tightened my arms around him. "No, what?" He swallowed his breath, hitching. "If I disappear, would anyone come looking?" His voice cracked on the last word. I felt the ground tilt beneath me, the world narrowing to the small boy I held against me, and the echo of a question I once carried but never dared speak aloud. Lucia closed her eyes, pain washing over her expression like a bruise spreading under skin. "Sweetheart," she whispered, cupping his cheek again. "Why would you ever think we wouldn't come?" Milo sniffed tears sliding down his face. "Because Dad didn't." The words hung heavy between us, unraveling the night into painful clarity. I had known Milo did not have a father in his life. Lucia had mentioned it indirectly always with quiet restraint. But hearing the ache in Milo's voice made it real in a way nothing else had. Lucia wiped his tears with trembling fingers. "Your father leaving has nothing to do with you. Nothing. He left because of his own choices, not because of who you are." Milo shook his head. "Kids at school said dads only leave kids they don't want." Lucia let out a sharp breath as if the sentence physically pierced her. "That is not true," she said firmly. "Not even a little." But Milo kept speaking as if the words had been held inside him so long they were finally spilling free. "I thought, if I sat here like the day we met Mr. Evan, maybe someone would come. Maybe someone would decide I was worth finding." That was the moment. The past I had spent decades burying cracked wide open. I saw myself again at 9 years old, sitting on a mattress in a shelter, clutching a worn red scarf someone had left behind. I remembered staring at the door until my eyes burned, waiting for someone to choose me, waiting for someone to prove that I mattered enough to come back. No one ever did. I had promised myself that night that I would never wait for anyone again, that needing people only made room for pain. Yet here I was, holding a child who had unknowingly repeated my entire history in one trembling sentence. And I knew with a clarity that struck deep and irrevocable what he needed to hear. I pulled back just enough to see his face. Snowflakes clung to his lashes, his lip quivered, his eyes wide and vulnerable searched mine with a quiet desperation that shattered whatever walls I had left. "Milo," I said, my voice steady this time, the weight of the moment anchoring me. "You are worth coming back for. You are worth finding. You are worth choosing. Every single time." He blinked up at me confused, as if no one had ever spoken those words to him. Maybe no one had. I went on the words coming from a place inside me I had never touched before. "The mistake wasn't yours. It was mine. I should never have stayed away. I should have been here." Milo wiped his nose with his sleeve. "So, you're not going to leave again." I felt something inside me shift like a locked door finally opening. "No," I said. "I'm not leaving. Not ever like that again." His breath shuddered and he pressed his face against my chest, letting go in a way that told me he believed me. Completely. Lucia watched us, her eyes shining with tears she didn't bother to hide. She touched Milo's back, then looked at me. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what those words mean to him." "I do," I said quietly. "More than you think." I hesitated before continuing, speaking barely above a whisper. No one said them to me when I was his age. Lucia's expression softened into something deep, something understanding. She didn't press for more. She didn't ask questions. She simply placed her hand over mine where it rested on Milo's back. The warmth of her touch traveled through the layers of fabric grounding me. We sat like that for a long time, the three of us huddled together on the icy bench, as if forming a small shelter of our own against the cold. Eventually, Lucia spoke again, her voice gentle but steady. "We should get him home, warm him up." I nodded, and as I stood, Milo clung to my coat. "Will you stay with us tonight?" he asked, his voice small, hopeful, barely audible. Lucia inhaled sharply, and for a moment she looked torn. Then she met my eyes, searching for an answer she wasn't sure she should ask for. I knelt so I could look Milo directly in the eyes. "If it's okay with your mom," I said softly, "then yes, I'll stay." Milo nodded satisfied and slipped his hand into mine. His grip was small but sure, trusting in a way that felt new and terrifying and right. Lucia exhaled slowly, a breath that seemed to release something she had been holding for too long. "Then let's go home," she said, and for the first time in years, the word home didn't feel like something meant for other people. It felt like a place I could walk toward. It felt like a place I wanted to stay. Lucia's apartment glowed with a soft amber warmth as soon as she unlocked the door, the kind of warmth that had nothing to do with the radiator humming quietly in the corner. It was lived-in warmth, handmade warmth, the warmth of a life stretched thin but held together by small rituals done with love. As we stepped inside, Milo still gripping my hand, I felt something unfamiliar move in my chest, something I had spent most of my adult life pretending I was above. Longing. Lucia hurried to turn on the lights, her movements gentle but urgent, the way mothers move when they are still calming their own adrenaline. The living room was small but inviting. A slightly crooked Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with mismatched ornaments, some clearly handmade by Milo. A garland of paper snowflakes hung across the window. A few candles flickered faintly on the bookshelf, casting dancing shadows across the room. It was imperfect, and it was beautiful. Lucia knelt in front of Milo, cupping his face in both hands. "Go change into warm pajamas," she said softly. "I'll make cocoa." Milo nodded and ran down the hallway, the quick patter of his feet fading as he disappeared behind a door. Lucia stayed kneeling for a moment, her hands dropping loosely to her lap, her shoulders sagging with the weight of everything she had been holding in. I reached out without thinking, placing a hand on her shoulder. She looked up at me, eyes tired but full of something far stronger than exhaustion. Gratitude. Trust. Maybe something else neither of us was ready to name. "Thank you," she whispered. "If you hadn't found him..." Her voice broke. I moved instinctively, offering support in the only way I knew how. "He's okay," I said. "He's safe. That's what matters." She nodded but didn't stand right away. She seemed to need a moment to settle her breath, to gather herself. I had seen her be strong so many times, steady and composed, but this was the first time I watched her allow herself to be vulnerable. It was strangely intimate, more intimate than anything we had shared before. She rose slowly. "Let me get the cocoa." While she was in the kitchen, I walked toward the Christmas tree, drawn to its uneven lights and the little details that made it theirs. A handmade ornament caught my eye. A small reindeer cut from thick paper colored with brown marker and decorated with gold glitter. In the corner of the room, beneath a pile of pillows, lay a shoebox filled with craft supplies, scissors, glue sticks, markers, scraps of ribbon. It was a life built with what little they had, but they turned it into something warm anyway. I felt my throat tighten. My childhood flashed briefly in my mind, the stark contrast of the shelters that never had decorations, the silence of holidays spent pretending the day was no different from any other. I had told myself for years that Christmas meant nothing, but standing in Lucia's living room, surrounded by evidence of a holiday created with love, I realized that I had never been indifferent. I had been deprived. Lucia returned with 2 mugs of cocoa steam rising in delicate spirals. She handed one to me and sat down on the couch, pulling her knees close. "Sit," she said softly. "Rest." I sat beside her, holding the mug in both hands. It was warm, sweeter than anything I usually let myself enjoy. Milo emerged from his room in flannel pajamas covered in tiny penguins, his hair slightly damp from where he had splashed water on his face. He climbed onto the couch between us and leaned against my arm as though the earlier distance between us had never existed. "Can we decorate the tree more?" he asked. "We still have space on the backside." Lucia smiled. "Sweetheart, no one sees the backside." "But the tree sees it," he said, "and Mr. Evan can sit on that side so it's not lonely." I felt something flutter in my chest. Lucia looked at me, her eyes warming. "I suppose we can add a few more ornaments." I didn't remember standing up, but suddenly the 3 of us were gathered around the tree. Milo pulled out the craft box and dumped everything onto the floor. "We can make ornaments. It's better when they're homemade." I had never made a Christmas ornament in my life. I didn't say that aloud. Instead, I followed his lead, cutting shapes from colorful paper. Lucia helped tie ribbons on top her fingers, brushing mine once then again, each time sending a quiet spark through me. We hung the ornaments together, some crooked, some too big, some lopsided, but every one of them felt like it belonged. Milo handed me a snowflake made of popsicle sticks glued together and painted white. "You should put this one on," he said. "It's special." Why, I asked. "Because it's for grown-ups who come back." Lucia looked at me quickly, eyes wide, but Milo spoke as if he had said nothing unusual. I swallowed hard. I placed the ornament on a branch near the top, hands steadier than I expected. When we finished, Milo crawled onto the couch again, wrapping himself in a blanket. He yawned, his small body relaxing into the cushions. Lucia sat beside him, brushing her fingers through his hair. "This is nice," he murmured sleepily. "Best Christmas ever." Lucia smiled, leaning down to kiss the top of his head. Then her gaze lifted to me, soft and full of something unspoken. "Thank you for staying," she said. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I replied. She held my eyes for a long moment. Quiet, certain, anchored. The kind of moment that shifts the ground beneath you without a sound. Milo drifted off not long after, his breaths deepening into the slow rhythm of sleep. Lucia pulled a blanket over him and stood, her movements gentle. I stood too. We met near the Christmas tree, the lights casting a warm glow across her face. "You really scared me tonight," she said softly. "When you found him." "He scared me too," I whispered. "More than anything." She reached for my hand without thinking, and I took it without hesitation. We stood like that in the glow of the crooked tree, holding on to something too new to define and too real to ignore. For the first time in my life, Christmas didn't feel like a season passing around me. It felt like a moment I was allowed to step into. A moment I did not want to leave. The theater buzzed with low chatter, the hum of excited parents and restless children filling the air like a soft current. I sat near the back, not because I wanted distance, but because I wanted to see everything unfold at once. Lucia had invited me, though she had tried to say it casually as if it were no big thing, but I knew it mattered to her, and it mattered to me more than I expected. The room was warm, gently lit with string lights draped across the small wooden stage. The chairs were all mismatched, as if borrowed from different decades, and the walls held drawings made by the kids. It was imperfect, but it was alive. Lucia moved between backstage and the front rows, checking props, fixing collars, reassuring nervous kids. She was in her element here, steady, patient, glowing in that quiet way of hers. Every time she passed by, my chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to hope. When the lights dimmed, the room settled instantly. Parents leaned forward, children hushed. The play began with a simple narration, and soon Milo stepped onto the stage. He wore a little blue coat and a paper lantern hung from a stick. His character was a boy who had lost his light and was searching for a way to restore it. The script was Lucia's. The soul of it was unmistakably hers, and Milo brought it to life with a sincerity that made the entire room lean in. "When you feel lost," Milo said in his clear, steady voice, "sometimes you borrow someone else's light until you find your own again." The line struck through me like a breath held too long. I had heard echoes of it months ago in the cold, in the way Milo reached for me before either of us understood why. I watched him now, confident and gentle, moving across the stage. I thought about how this small boy who had believed in me, who had trusted me, had unknowingly held up a lantern to parts of my life I had spent years avoiding. Watching him, it felt as though he was holding that lantern again, this time toward the audience, toward me, toward anyone who needed it. And I realized that I was no longer the man who sat on a frozen bench in silence, avoiding the world. Not entirely. I was someone beginning to allow himself to be found. The play continued, each scene crafted with so much tenderness that even the adults forgot themselves. There were small laughs, moments of awe, a few sniffles from people who thought they were too composed to cry at a children's performance. When the final scene approached, the lights shifted, focusing on the small cardboard forest backdrop and Milo standing alone in its center. A soft instrumental melody played. He lifted the lantern, now glowing faintly. "I thought I had to shine on my own," he said, "but the truth is, light grows when someone shares theirs with you." My breath caught. The line was meant to be universal, but it felt like it was carved out specifically for me, for Lucia, for the three of us on that snowy night. When the curtain fell, applause erupted, echoing against the walls. Parents stood cheering as their children took awkward bows. Milo looked out into the crowd, searching until he found me. He grinned and waved with both hands. I felt something warm and full swell inside my chest. Lucia appeared beside him on stage, gathering the children for a group bow. Her eyes caught mine, and she smiled the kind of smile that made everything in the room soften around the edges. Eventually, the crowd filed out. I waited near the side of the stage, wanting to give them space, but also unable to leave. The moment Lucia saw me, she walked over her steps slower, gentler, her clipboard pressed to her chest. "You came," she said softly. "Of course," I replied. "I wouldn't have missed it." She laughed a little breathless. "He did so well, didn't he?" "He was extraordinary," I said. "Just like his mom." She blinked at that, caught off guard, then looked down as if grounding herself. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The kids started spilling into the hallway, parents congratulating them. Milo came running, still wearing part of his costume. He wrapped his arms around my waist before I could even prepare myself. "Did you see me?" he asked, breathless. "I saw every second," I said. "You were brave. And bright." He beamed, then turned to Lucia. "Can we get ice cream? I think actors get ice cream after shows." Lucia shook her head with mock exasperation. "You made that up." "But it sounds true," he insisted. I chuckled. "It does sound true." Lucia sighed in defeat. "Fine, but only one scoop." As Milo ran off to change clothes, Lucia and I walked slowly toward the backstage area. She paused near a stack of prop boxes, her fingers brushing over a cardboard lantern. "You know," she said quietly, "there was a real boy who inspired that story. A boy I met a long time ago." My heart thudded once painfully loud. "A boy who stayed with my mom when she did foster care," she continued. "He was quiet, sad. He always held a picture of a reindeer someone drew for him." My breath seized. She didn't look at me yet. Her voice softened. "I used to leave him little things. Candy, notes. I just wanted him to feel seen. I could no longer hold the truth inside." "Lucia," I said, my voice breaking. "That boy was me." She froze. The air thickened between us, charged with years of unspoken history. Slowly she turned. Her eyes widened, filling with a dozen emotions at once. Recognition, shock, understanding, grief, and something like fate. "Evan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "All this time, I kept the drawing," I said. "For years. It meant more to me than anything." Her hand rose to her mouth as tears gathered in her lashes. "I can't believe you're him." I stepped closer, afraid to break the moment, but unable to stop myself. "You were the first person who ever made me feel like I mattered." A tear fell onto her cheek. "And you were the boy I never forgot." Neither of us moved for a long moment. Then she reached for my hand, her fingers curling into mine, as if she had always known where it belonged. It felt less like discovering the past and more like reclaiming something we had lost along the way. Milo came running back then, calling our names, breaking the tension with innocent exuberance. Lucia wiped her tears quickly and smiled at him. As he grabbed both our hands, tugging us toward the door, I realized something simple and profound. This boy, this woman, this unexpected reconnection had taught me something I had never understood before. Light was not something you earned. It was something given freely, shared willingly, passed from one heart to another, and I was no longer afraid to receive it. The snow had softened into a gentle dusting by the time we reached the park, falling in slow spirals that glittered beneath the street lamps like tiny drifting stars. Milo insisted we walk through the same path where we had first met, claiming it was good luck, and neither Lucia nor I had the heart to deny him. The world felt quieter here, as though the trees themselves were listening. When we approached the old iron bench, I felt something tighten in my chest. It looked exactly the same as the night everything changed. Same chipped paint, same cold metal, same stillness hanging over it like a memory that refused to fade. Lucia brushed the snow off with her glove and sat down, pulling her coat tighter around her. Milo climbed up beside her, swinging his legs, humming something under his breath that reminded me of the tune from his play. I stood for a moment letting the sight sink in. A woman with golden brown hair catching the glow of the lamp behind her. A boy whose smile had once cracked something open inside me I thought was beyond repair. And the bench. The one that had held me at my lowest, and yet somehow became the place where my life quietly shifted direction. I sat down next to them, the cold seeping through my coat, but not enough to dim the warmth that had begun to grow inside me. Lucia reached into her canvas bag again, pulling out the same silver thermos she always carried. She poured cocoa into 3 mismatched cups and handed them out like an unspoken ritual between us. "It's silly," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, "but I felt like we needed this. One more moment here." "It's not silly," I said. "It feels right." Milo sipped his cocoa, then reached into his own coat pocket. "I made something," he said. "For tonight." He pulled out a folded piece of cardstock, its edges stiff with drying glue and glitter. When he opened it, I saw 3 stick figures drawn on a snowy bench surrounded by little dots representing falling snow. One figure was tall, with a long coat and sad eyes. One was a woman with wavy hair, and beside her was a little boy with a huge smile. "That's us," Milo announced proudly. "The night we met." I felt a sharp ache in my chest, the kind of ache that comes when something beautiful touches a place that used to be empty. "It's perfect," I managed. "Thank you. Mom said the best memories should be saved," Milo said. "So I saved this one." Lucia smiled softly. "He worked on it for days. Hid it from me, too." I looked down at the drawing again, and for a moment I couldn't speak. Not because I had anything sad to say, but because the simplicity of it made something inside me settle in a way I wasn't sure it ever had before. Milo leaned against me, then resting his head on my arm. "Mr. Evan, are you still borrowing my mom?" His tone was curious, not accusing. Childlike, but deeply perceptive in the way only children seem to manage. Lucia inhaled sharply beside me, her breath catching on the question. She didn't look at me. She didn't guide the moment. She simply waited. I looked down at Milo's small, trusting face, then up at Lucia's eyes. Her gaze met mine with quiet intensity. Hope, fear, tenderness, and something deeper, all of it reflected back at me. I took a slow breath, then I reached for Lucia's hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers curled into mine immediately as though they had been waiting for that exact moment. I looked at Milo and let the truth rise from the place inside me that had finally stopped hiding. "No," I said softly. "I'm not borrowing anymore." Milo's eyes widened, then he grinned so big his cheeks lifted into his eyes. "Really?" "Really," I said. "If your mom wants me here, then I'm staying." Lucia exhaled a sound halfway between relief and something like a quiet laugh. "I want you here," she whispered. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a declaration shouted into the night. It was soft, steady, certain, and that made it feel truer than anything else could have. Milo threw his arms around both of us in a clumsy half-hug, nearly spilling his cocoa. "This is the best night ever," he declared. "We're like a real family now." Lucia and I exchanged a look over his head, a look full of understanding and something like awe, because he was right, not in a legal sense, not in any traditional definition, but in the ways that mattered, in the ways that stitched people together through shared hurt, shared healing, shared moments that shaped new beginnings. I thought back to the boy I once was, the lonely 9-year-old sitting in a quiet foster room clutching a drawing of a reindeer because it was the only thing that made him feel seen. If I could speak to him now, I would tell him that all the years of waiting didn't lead to nothing. They led him here, to this bench, to this woman, to this child, to the promise he never heard but finally found. Lucia leaned her head gently against my shoulder, and I felt her breath warm through my coat. "Evan," she murmured, "I'm glad you stayed. I turned slightly so I could press a kiss to the top of her hair. It felt natural. I had never known what natural felt like before. "Me too," I whispered. "More than you know." Milo began humming again, the melody drifting into the quiet park air. Snow kept falling soft and endless, settling on our coats, our hair, the old iron bench beneath us. The same bench that had once held my loneliness now held something entirely different. A beginning, a home, a place I chose and was chosen in return. We sat there until the cold finally nudged us back to reality. When Lucia stood, she squeezed my hand and Milo grabbed the other. And as the three of us walked down the snowy path, leaving footprints side by side, I realized something simple and profound. I had not borrowed anything at all. I had been given a place to belong, and this time I wasn't letting go. When the snow settled softly around that final image of three people choosing each other, you might have felt something stir inside you, something small but unmistakably warm, the kind of warmth that reminds us that even in a world full of noise and distance, moments of connection still break through. Maybe it made you think of a time when you wished someone had stayed. Maybe it reminded you of a moment when a simple act of kindness shifted the direction of your life in ways you didn't fully understand until much later. Stories like this are not just fiction. They are mirrors. They reflect the loneliness we carry, the regrets we avoid speaking aloud, and the unexpected grace that sometimes finds us when we think we no longer deserve it. If you have ever waited for someone who never came, if you have ever wondered whether your presence mattered, if you have ever held on to a small memory because it made the world feel a little less cold, then you already understand Evan, Lucia, and Milo far more deeply than any words on a screen can explain. Life doesn't always give us perfect families or perfect beginnings. More often, it gives us fractured starts, long winters, and old wounds we pretend we've moved past. Yet somehow, in the quietest moments, healing finds its way in through places we never thought to open. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a child who believes in you before you believe in yourself. Sometimes it's a woman who sees you without asking you to perform. And sometimes it's simply a bench on a snowy night reminding you that your story isn't over no matter how long you've spent convincing yourself otherwise. If this story made you pause even for a second, if it made you breathe a little deeper, or blink away a quiet tear that means something, it means the light inside you, the one you thought had dimmed, is still there. And here, in this little corner of the internet, we want to help you keep it glowing. This channel isn't just about stories. It's about second chances, unexpected families, forgiveness you didn't know you needed, and the beautiful truth that love often arrives disguised as ordinary moments. We believe that every heart carries a story, and some stories are meant to be shared so they can remind others that they are not walking through life alone. If you felt seen tonight, even just a little, I want to invite you to stay, not because algorithms demand it, not because numbers matter, but because there is a seat here for you. A place where your experiences, your emotions, your memories find company. By subscribing, you're not just supporting a channel. You're joining a circle of people who understand the quiet battles we fight and the quiet victories that keep us going. And if you choose to stay with us, I promise you this: there will be more stories that speak to the part of you that still hopes, still remembers, still believes in connection. Stories that honor the resilience you've built, the grief you've carried, and the joy you still deserve. Stories that remind you that no matter your age, your past, your mistakes, or your losses, there is always room for new beginnings, for gentleness, for love that arrives softly and stays. So if this story touched something in you, if it warmed a place you thought had gone cold, I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe to share this space with us, to keep walking this road of stories that heal, stories that linger. Stories that whisper, you are not alone. Because just like Evan learned sometimes, the light we think we lost returns in ways we never see coming, and sometimes that light begins right here with you.